Welcome to your deep dive. We're tackling wills and trusts today. Using all the videos you sent in, it's one of those things that might seem kind of dry at first glance. But stick with us. It gets really interesting.
Oh, it does, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's something everyone should really think about, you know? Doesn't matter how old you are or how much money you have.
You're right. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is estate planning? Is it just about writing a will?
It's so much more than just a will. Think of it as a roadmap for your assets.
Yeah.
And for your wishes. Like, what happens if you can't make decisions yourself? Like if you're incapacitated. And it also covers what happens after you die.
Okay, so it's about preparing for both of those scenarios. Got it. Now, the videos mentioned probate a lot, and it sounded like something you really want to try to avoid. What exactly makes probate so tricky?
Well, probate is basically the court process that happens after you die to figure out how to distribute your assets. And the problem is, it can take a long time, and it can be expensive.
Really? Like, how long are we talking?
It can sometimes take well over a year. And it can end up costing a huge chunk of your estate just in fees.
A year? I had no idea it could drag on for that long. And losing a big chunk of your money to fees? Yeah, that's definitely something I'd want to avoid.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to know the difference between probate assets and non-probate assets. So things like your house or your car, your bank accounts, if they're just in your name, those typically have to go through probate. But things like life insurance policies or retirement accounts, those usually have what's called a beneficiary designation. And that means they pass directly to whoever you've named as the beneficiary. They skip the whole probate process.
Oh, that makes sense. So that could be one way to minimize how much of your estate has to go through probate.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things we think about when we're putting together an estate plan.
So let's talk about the foundation of most estate plans, wills. What exactly can a will do for you?
A will is basically like your written instruction manual for what happens to your stuff after you die. It's where you can name guardians for your kids if they're minors. And you can say exactly how you want your belongings to be divided up. You can even outline your funeral arrangements.
That's pretty comprehensive. So why would anyone need anything more than a will?
Well, a will is definitely essential, but it does have its limitations. Like, remember how we talked about probate? A will doesn't bypass probate. Your assets still have to go through that whole court process.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I see. And a will only kicks in after you die, right? What if something happens where you're still alive, but you can't make decisions for yourself?
That's a great point. And that's where incapacity planning comes in, which is something that a will doesn't really address. You need other documents for that, like a durable power of attorney for finances and a healthcare power of attorney for medical decisions.
Got it. So it's basically like choosing someone you trust to make those important decisions for you if you're not able to.
Exactly. And these documents can be so important, especially for younger people who maybe think, oh, that's never going to happen to me. But you just never know. Life can be unpredictable.
That's so true. The videos actually had this story about a woman whose living will, which is basically a document where you outline your healthcare wishes. You know, like if you're in a coma or something. Well, hers actually ended up helping save her life on 3 separate occasions. It's crazy.
Exactly. You never know what could happen. That's why I always tell people estate planning isn't just for older folks. It's for everyone.
Okay, you've convinced me. So we've got wills and incapacity planning documents. But what about trusts? They seem to be like the heavy hitters of estate planning. What makes them so special?
A trust is kind of like a separate legal entity. Think of it like a container that holds and manages your assets. And it does that based on your instructions.
Yeah.
And you choose someone you trust to be in charge of that container. They're called the trustee.
Interesting. So it's like having a personal assistant for your money, even after you're gone.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And one of the big advantages of a trust is it can actually help you completely avoid probate because the trust technically owns the assets. They don't have to go through that whole court process.
Wow, okay. That's a huge plus, especially with how expensive and time-consuming probate can be. And there are different types of trusts, right?
Yeah, there are. The most common one is called a revocable living trust. Revocable means you can change it or cancel it during your lifetime. And living means it's set up while you're still alive.
Got it. That flexibility is good. What are some other benefits of a trust?
Besides avoiding probate, trusts also offer a lot more privacy than a will probate. Probate records are public, but trusts are private. And they can also help protect your assets from things like lawsuits or creditors.
Wait, hold on. I thought trusts could also protect your assets from creditors while you're still alive. Is that true?
That's a common misunderstanding. A revocable living trust doesn't protect your own assets from creditors while you're alive. It protects your beneficiaries after you die. It's really about making sure that your legacy is protected, not about shielding your assets from your own personal liabilities.
Okay, so it's about safeguarding your beneficiaries, not necessarily you during your lifetime. Gotcha. That's important to clarify, but I'm still a little confused. If a trust can avoid probate, does that mean you don't need a will at all?
Well, that's where something called a pour-over will comes in. It works together with a living trust to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks.
A pour-over will, what is that?
So let's say you have a living trust, but maybe you haven't put all of your assets into the trust yet. Maybe you forgot about a bank account or a piece of real estate. The pour-over will acts like a safety net. Basically, it says that any assets that aren't in your trust when you die should be transferred into the trust.
Oh, that's smart. So make sure everything ends up in the trust, even if you miss a few things.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can be easily missed, we can't forget about beneficiary designations. Those can really mess up your estate plan if they're not aligned with your will or trust.
Beneficiary designations, remind me what those are again?
They're basically the people you name to inherit certain assets, like your life insurance policy or your retirement accounts.
Right, but why are they such a big deal?
Because beneficiary designations actually override your will and even your trust. So let's say you named your spouse as the beneficiary in your life insurance policy, but in your will you say you want everything to go to your kids? Well, the life insurance money is still going to go to your spouse because of that beneficiary designation.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that. It makes you realize how important those little details can be.
Absolutely. And it's honestly one of the most common mistakes that people make. They create this whole detailed will or trust, but then they completely forget to update their beneficiary designations. And it can lead to some really unintended consequences.
So regular review and making sure everything is coordinated is super important.
You got it. And this is one of the reasons why working with an estate planning attorney can be so helpful. They can help you figure all this stuff out and make sure that everything actually reflects your wishes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like estate planning is a lot more complicated than I initially thought. It's definitely not just about writing a will and calling it a day.
You're telling me.
Yeah.
It's this whole process where you have to think about your assets, your wishes, and all these different things that could happen. And those celebrity cautionary tales that we'll get into later, oh man, they really show you what can go wrong when things aren't done right.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. But before we jump into those stories, let's take a quick pause and recap what we've learned so far. I think it's a good place to take a breather.
Yeah, sounds good. We've covered a lot already, so it's good to make sure everyone's still with us.
Right. So what are the most important things we've learned about estate planning so far?
Okay, so we've got the basics down with wills and trusts and those beneficiary designations. But now let's get to the juicy stuff. The videos mentioned some cautionary tales from the celebrity world, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Those stories really highlight why estate planning is so important, no matter how famous or how wealthy you are.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give me the gossip. Who should we start with?
Well, let's talk about Philip Seymour Hoffman. Amazing actor. Sadly passed away without a really solid estate plan in place.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Didn't he leave behind a pretty sizable fortune?
He did. It was estimated to be around $35 million. But because he just had a simple will, it didn't really account for estate taxes. So a lot of that money ended up going to the IRS instead of going to his family.
Oh, wow. So even if you have a will, it might not be enough if it's not set up properly to deal with taxes.
Exactly. That's one of the big mistakes people make. They think just having any will is good enough, but it really needs to be tailored to your specific situation. That makes sense. Okay, who's next on our celebrity estate planning tour?
Let's talk about Mickey Rooney. You know, Hollywood legend, career spanning decades.
Yeah, I vaguely remember hearing something about his case. What happened there?
It was a really sad case of elder abuse.
Mm.
His 8th wife and her son, basically they took advantage of his declining health, and they manipulated him into signing documents that gave them control over his finances.
That's terrible. To think that someone who brought so much joy to others could be treated like that in his final years.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that elder abuse is a real problem, and it can happen to anyone, even celebrities.
So how can you protect yourself or your loved ones from something like that?
Having a strong support system is so important. But a well-drafted estate plan can also help protect you. For instance, a trust with a trustworthy trustee can help safeguard assets and prevent that kind of abuse.
Okay, so it's like having a financial guardian angel looking out for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's never too early to start thinking about these things.
Okay, so we've seen some examples of estate planning gone wrong. Now I'm curious about the opposite. Are there any celebrity estate plans that are considered like model examples?
Well, despite some of the controversies surrounding it, Michael Jackson's estate plans is often cited as a well-executed example.
Really? I thought his estate was tied up in legal battles for years.
There were definitely some disputes, but overall, his plan was structured really effectively. It included a trust that provided for his children and ensured their financial security, which was his main priority.
So even with really complicated situations, a well-drafted plan can actually achieve its goals.
Absolutely. It shows how important it is to work with an experienced estate planning attorney, someone who can anticipate potential challenges and create a plan that can withstand scrutiny.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about situations where inheriting a lot of money could actually be a bad thing? I mean, suddenly receiving a huge sum of money could be overwhelming, could lead to some bad decisions.
You're right. It's like winning the lottery without any financial knowledge. Studies have actually shown that sudden wealth can lead to impulsive spending, bad investments, even bankruptcy.
So how can you prevent an inheritance from becoming more of a burden than a blessing?
That's where trusts with specific instructions and payout schedules can be really helpful. You can structure it so that your beneficiaries receive their inheritance over time, instead of getting a huge lump sum all at once.
So it's like creating a safety net that protects them from making rash decisions with a sudden windfall.
Exactly. It allows you to control how and when they receive their inheritance, which can help them avoid potential pitfalls.
Wow, these celebrity stories really drive home the point that you need expert advice when it comes to estate planning. It's not something you want to try to figure out on your own.
Definitely not. It's crucial to work with a qualified estate planning attorney, someone who can guide you through the process and make sure your plan is legally sound and that it truly reflects what you want.
It's funny, though, because a lot of people probably think, I'm not a celebrity, I don't need a fancy estate plan. But these stories show that it's really for everyone.
That's the big takeaway. Estate planning isn't about how much money you have. It's about taking control of your legacy and making sure that your loved ones are protected no matter what.
Right, and I'm realizing that estate planning isn't a one-time thing. Life is always changing, so our plans need to change too.
Exactly.
Oh.
Marriage, divorce, kids, deaths, all these things can have a huge impact on your estate plan. And you should review it and update it regularly, even if there aren't any major life changes.
Like that story from the videos about the couple who wanted to split their assets 60-40, but they ended up with a 50-50 split because they didn't fund their trust properly.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of how overlooking the details can have some serious consequences. It really shows why you need to stay on top of things and get professional help.
Okay, so regular reviews, updates, expert advice.
Got
it. But before we move on, I want to go back to something we touched on earlier. Digital assets. What exactly are those, and how do they fit into all of this?
Digital assets are basically anything you own or have rights to online. So things like your social media accounts, email, online banking, cryptocurrency, photos and videos stored in the cloud. The list goes on and on.
Wow, that's a lot. I never really thought about them as assets before.
It's a relatively new area of estate planning, but it's becoming more and more important as our lives move increasingly online.
So how do you actually include digital assets in your estate plan? Can you just put your passwords in your will?
Not really. Putting passwords in your will isn't very secure, and it's not really efficient either. Remember, probate records are public, so you don't want your sensitive information out there for anyone to see.
Yeah, you're right. That would be bad. So what's the best way to handle digital assets?
It depends on the specific platform and what you want to happen. Some platforms have built-in legacy settings, where you can choose someone to manage your account after you die.
Oh, like how Facebook lets you choose a legacy contact.
Exactly. That's a good example. But for other things, like financial accounts or cryptocurrency, you might need to work with an estate planning attorney to create specific instructions. Or you might want to use a digital asset management service.
Okay, so it's about finding the right approach for each type of digital asset.
Exactly. And it's so important to document your wishes clearly. And to keep that information up to date, think about it. If no one knows how to access your accounts, those assets could be lost forever.
That's a scary thought. It's like those online treasure hunts where people are trying to crack codes to find lost Bitcoin fortunes.
Well, maybe not quite as dramatic as that.
Yeah.
But you get the idea. Planning for your digital legacy is just as important as planning for your physical assets.
So it sounds like estate planning is even more complex than we first thought.
It definitely can be, but don't let it overwhelm you. We're here to break it down into manageable pieces.
All right, so we've covered wills trusts, beneficiary designations, probate avoidance, and now digital assets. Anything else we need to add to our estate planning checklist?
Yes, actually. There's one crucial element we haven't discussed yet. Choosing the right trustee.
Oh, right. The trustee, that's the person or entity who's in charge of managing the trust.
Exactly. And choosing the right trustee is a really big decision. You don't want to take it lightly. They have a lot of responsibility. And their actions can have a major impact on your legacy.
So what qualities should you look for in a trustee? What makes someone a good fit for that role?
Well, first and foremost, they need to be honest, trustworthy, and capable of handling financial matters. They should be organized, detail-oriented, and able to make smart decisions that are in your best interest.
So basically someone who's got it together and won't run off with all the money.
Uh-huh. Well, yes, integrity is definitely key. But you also need to think about their relationship to you and your beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Ideally, you want someone who can navigate any potential conflicts and help keep the peace in the family.
Okay, so it's about finding a balance between competence and trustworthiness while also considering the family dynamics.
Exactly. And for some people, a professional trustee might be the best option, like a bank or a trust company. They can provide impartiality and expertise, which can be really valuable, especially in complicated situations.
So if you're not sure who to choose, a professional trustee could be a good solution, but I imagine it ultimately comes down to your individual needs and preferences.
Absolutely. There's no one right answer when it comes to choosing a trustee. It's about finding what works best for you and your family.
Well said. So to recap, we've talked about wills, trusts, beneficiary designations, probate avoidance, digital assets, and even choosing a trustee.
We have. It's a lot to digest, so I'm glad we're taking these breaks to summarize everything.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, those celebrity estate planning mishaps were definitely eye-opening, and they made me realize that I need to get serious about estate planning myself, and sooner rather than later.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's never too early to start planning. Even if you're young and don't have many assets, a basic estate plan can give you peace of mind. Make sure your wishes are followed no matter what.
I'm totally on board now, but before I run out and find an estate planning attorney, is there anything else we need to cover?
Actually, yes. We've focused a lot on the legal and financial side of estate planning, which are obviously crucial. But there's another aspect to this that's equally important: legacy planning.
Legacy planning. I've heard that term, but I'm not really sure what it means.
It's about thinking beyond just how your assets are distributed. Legacy planning is about figuring out what you want to be remembered for, what kind of impact you want to have on the world, what values you want to pass on.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's like writing the next chapter, but instead of focusing on what you leave behind, it's more about the meaning and purpose behind it all.
I like that. And it all starts with some deep introspection. What are you passionate about? What causes are close to your heart?
So it's less about numbers and spreadsheets and more about figuring out what really matters to you. Do you have any examples of how people incorporate those values into their estate plans?
Of course, charitable giving is a big one. You can set up a charitable trust or a foundation to support the causes you care about, even if you're not super rich.
That makes sense. You don't have to be a millionaire to make a difference.
Nope. Every little bit helps. It's about using your resources to support your values, no matter how big or small those resources are.
I'm starting to see how legacy planning can be really personal and creative. It's not just about writing checks.
You're right. Think about it. You could leave behind a collection of letters or journals, sharing your life story and wisdom with future generations. Or maybe you have a special skill or hobby that you want to pass on.
Oh, like funding a scholarship for young artists or musicians, or establishing a community garden to promote healthy living and sustainability.
Those are great examples. You could even create a whole legacy project, something you're passionate about that you want to see continue after you're gone.
It's amazing to think about all the possibilities. You can have a real impact that lasts long after you're gone.
And that impact doesn't have to be limited to your family or your community. You can contribute to global causes, research, whatever speaks to you.
This whole conversation has really changed how I think about estate planning. It's not just about protecting your stuff, it's about making a difference in the world.
Exactly. That's the whole point of legacy planning, leaving behind a legacy that has meaning and purpose.
So for someone listening who's feeling inspired, what's the first step they should take?
Start by having those deep conversations with yourself and with your loved ones. What do you want your legacy to be? What kind of impact do you want to have?
It sounds like it's a journey of self-discovery as much as anything else.
It really is. And once you have a clearer vision, you can start working with professionals to create a plan that reflects your values and your goals.
This deep dive has been amazing. We started out feeling a little overwhelmed by estate planning, but now I feel empowered and excited about all the possibilities.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, it's never too early or too late to start planning. Take control of your legacy and make it something you're proud of.
Well said. And thank you so much for guiding us through this topic. It's complex, but so important.
It's been my pleasure. I hope this deep dive has given you the knowledge and the inspiration to start planning for a future that reflects your values and that has a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into estate planning and legacy planning. Remember, your legacy is something you can shape and create. Take the first step today and start building a future you can be proud of. All right, so we spent a lot of time talking about the legal side of wills and trusts and all that, but you mentioned legacy planning is about more than just the financial stuff.
Right. It's about thinking bigger picture, like what do you want people to remember you for? What kind of mark do you want to leave on the world? What values do you want to pass down?
It's kind of like writing the next chapter, but instead of focusing on what you leave behind, it's more about the meaning and purpose behind it all.
Yeah, exactly. And it starts with really looking inward. What are you passionate about? What causes are important to you?
So less about numbers and more about your heart.
Oh.
Got it. Do you have any examples of how people actually put those values into their estate plans?
Definitely. Like charitable giving is a big one. You could set up a charitable trust or a foundation to support the causes you believe in, even if you're not super wealthy.
That makes sense. You don't have to be a billionaire to make a difference.
Nope. Every little bit counts. It's about aligning your resources with your values, no matter how big or small those resources are.
I'm starting to realize this can be a really personal and creative process. It's not just about writing checks.
It's not. You could leave behind letters or journals, share your life story and advice with future generations. Or maybe you have a skill or a hobby that you want to pass down.
Like funding a scholarship for young artists or musicians, or setting up a community garden to promote healthy living and sustainability.
Exactly. You could even create a whole legacy project, like something you're really passionate about that you want to see continue after you're gone.
Wow, the possibilities are endless. You can really make a lasting impact, even after you're not around anymore.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be limited to your family or your local community. You could contribute to global causes or research, whatever feels important to you.
This is making me think about estate planning in a whole new way. It's not just about protecting what you have. It's about making a positive difference in the world.
Exactly. That's what legacy planning is all about, creating a meaningful and purposeful legacy.
So for someone who's listening and feeling inspired, what would be the first step they should take?
I'd say start by having those deep conversations with yourself and with your loved ones. Ask yourself, what do you want your legacy to be? What kind of impact do you want to have?
It sounds like a journey of self-discovery as much as anything else.
It is. And once you have a clearer vision, then you can work with professionals to actually create a plan that reflects your values and goals.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening. We started out feeling kind of overwhelmed, but now I feel empowered and excited about all the possibilities.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's never too early or too late to start planning. Take control of your legacy and make it something you're truly proud of.
Well said. And thank you so much for helping us understand all of this. It's complicated, but so important.
My pleasure. I hope this deep dive has given everyone the knowledge and the motivation to start planning for a future that aligns with their values and that makes a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into estate planning and legacy planning. Remember, your legacy is something you can shape and mold. Take that first step today and start building a future that you can be proud of.